With WWE in contact with AEW and the potential direction for the storyline between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, this is Wrestling Hub. My name is John, and you're watching the Wrestling Report for January 9th. Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Hub and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at WrestlingHubOfficial, and also follow us on Twitter at Wrestling_Hub. At Impact Wrestling's Hard to Kill event, Mickie James would successfully defend her Knockouts title in the main event against Deonna Purrazzo. With James having been announced to be a part of the WWE Women's Royal Rumble, she looks to be entering that match as champion. According to Fightful, Mickie James and Deonna Purrazzo are making a lot of history this weekend, between Mickie being announced as a Royal Rumble entrant while Knockouts champion and Purrazzo competing for the ROH title, which she's expected to win. However, they made history in being set to main event the Hard to Kill pay-per-view. We're told that this was not a reactionary move from the company based on the Royal Rumble announcement for James. At least since last week, the plan was for James and Purrazzo to main event the show. The company wanted it to serve as a surprise, with one source comparing it to the X Division main eventing Unbreakable 2005 as the most buzzworthy match on the show. On his podcast, former WWE writer Freddie Prinze Jr. touched on the AEW women's division, noting that he'd like to see a women's-only show. They have to start it by signing a bunch of these recently released women. But what if AEW do a women's division and gave it an hour and a half, or gave it the full 2 hours on one of their nights? After being released by WWE in November, Taya Valkyrie spoke during the East Coast autographed auctions, saying this about signing with AEW. Of course, I would go to AEW. I mean, they are doing something different. A lot of my peers and my best friends, my brothers, Ray Phoenix and Pentagon, are over there, so why not? So we'll see what happens. On Keeping It 100, the rematch between Hangman Page and Bryan Danielson was discussed, as Conan criticized AEW for not building this bout correctly. One thing that sticks out to me is that they had no video packages. Like, that show should have started off with what happened last week, and the last match they had together. AEW really should have built it up with a real good package like WWE does. They gave more time on the Malachi Black and Brian Pillman match. I know there was going to be a good match, and I knew it was going to be good. It was actually better than I expected. I actually thought this match was great. On that same podcast, Conan would also give props to AEW for building up so many stars, but would say that it's too early for Adam Page to be world champion. I applaud AEW for making new stars, whether it's Darby Allin, Jungle Boy, or Jade, or even this guy Adam Page. And it does help that you beat the best wrestler twice, or at least once, because the first one was a tie, and you had great matches with them. Despite all of this, I feel like Page shouldn't be the AEW world champion. I still feel it's too early. I still feel it is something he should have given later. With Toni Storm quitting WWE recently, many are wondering where she'll end up next. When it comes to her debuting in AEW, Britt Baker said this on the In The Click podcast. Toni Storm, I think, when you talk about top female wrestlers, if she doesn't come to mind, then you're not watching, because she's absolutely phenomenal. She's wrestled all over the world. I've never wrestled her. I would love to somehow, some way, someplace lock up with her. With WWE announcing that Impact Knockouts champion Mickie James would be returning to the Royal Rumble, this had many fans thinking that the Forbidden Door had been opened for WWE. On that same podcast, Britt Baker would note that given WWE's constant releases, they don't need the Forbidden Door. I mean, obviously, one of my best friends, who I think one of the best female wrestlers out there today is Deonna Purrazzo. She wrestles for Impact, so I would love to definitely lock up with her one day. Not to kind of turn the tides here, but unfortunately, WWE has been releasing so many talents that right now you don't even have to cross any forbidden doors. There are just so many amazingly talented free agents right now, period. There are so many that I would love to wrestle I've never wrestled before. When it comes to the feud between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, Dave Meltzer would write in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that there could be a title change coming soon. The plan for day one was that Seth was going to be the WWE Champion coming off of the show, and Lesnar was going to be the Universal Champion coming off of the show. So Lesnar is now the WWE Champion, so I'm wondering if they are just going to go. Seth was going to defend the title on one of the WrestleMania nights, and then Lesnar and Roman were going to be for the other title on the other WrestleMania night. I was kind of told it's going to end up where it's supposed to be, so I wonder if that means they're gonna switch belts, like the Universal belt with Seth goes on Raw, and the WWE belt that Roman would end up most likely, I'm gonna guess, but Brock would be on SmackDown, which was not the plan, but maybe how they end up recalibrating everything because of Roman missing the pay-per-view and them deciding to go with Brock to win the other title because Brock was gonna win the one title. I can't say 100% that Brock was gonna win the other title. I mean, I'm pretty sure. Seth, I know 100% that was the plan, to win the WWE Championship, but Brock had to be winning over Roman at day one because it was the second match. Roman won the first and Heyman was going to end up back with Brock. I figured that Heyman was going to screw Roman in the match, but the match never happened, and instead of waiting to do the match at the Royal Rumble, the decision was made that Paul had already been fired and we're not going to take him off TV, so we're going to put him with Brock right away with no storyline. He's just with Brock. I think that's how it was going to happen. I don't know that it means Seth wins, but it would make sense that it would happen, so that's kind of something there. With many thinking the Forbidden Door is open for WWE, Impact World Champion Moose would send out a tweet after defending his title at Hard to Kill, challenging the Tribal Chief and Universal Champion. "I claim to be the wrestling god. He claims to be the head of the table. With all this Forbidden Door talk, what if Roman Reigns?" While this match is unlikely to happen, it'll be interesting to see if there is any more crossover promotion to come from WWE's side. It was previously reported that Sasha Banks could have suffered an injury during a live event match against Charlotte. While Banks would initially say she was fine after the fact, WWE has announced that she is injured and will be taking time away from the ring, with them writing, "Breaking. Sasha Banks is expected to be out of action for 6 to 8 weeks after suffering a foot injury Sunday evening at a WWE live event in Fayetteville, North Carolina." Sasha would react to this post writing, "Enjoy it, ladies, because when I come back, I'm coming back. For everything. 30 women just got real lucky." In additional news, Fightful would report that WWE was aware Banks would be out of action prior to this announcement. Fightful Select learned that although the absence was announced Saturday, WWE Creative was pretty clear in that Banks wouldn't be available as early as January 3rd, after the injury occurred that prior weekend. Leading into that Raw, Fightful was told that Sasha Banks wasn't expected for the Royal Rumble, and that creatively the company should plan accordingly. As it turns out, Banks is expected to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. As the timetable indicates, she's not expected to have to miss WrestleMania, and that has been relayed to people of influence in the company as well. The Forbidden Door talk has got everyone hyped up, but when it comes to WWE working with AEW, it seems only to be for documentaries at this point, with Ringside News reporting there's a theory going that WWE is working with Impact Wrestling to get back at AEW. False. We were told that AEW is in discussions about projects with John Laurinaitis. WWE wants to use AEW talent for some upcoming documentaries they are doing. They're playing nice. Of course, this all stems from Mickie James being signed to Impact and being set to make an appearance for WWE. As Steve Carrier would add, Mickie James coming back for the Rumble is an example of a big changing policy in WWE. We were told that when Laurinaitis reached out for her to be in the Rumble, she told him she's under contract to Impact. Source said that's not an issue anymore. No borders. Kenny Omega would end up trending on Twitter due to him praising those in the women's division. While many were supportive of Omega's comments, one fan said, "You're also ignoring my questions ultimately. Why is he not weird to you and you feel strongly enough about him to jump to his defense on Twitter?" Omega would reply, "You're tweeting a whole lot about questionable activity. When your profile picture boasts you inappropriately touching a child you may or may not have abducted, go away. The picture just looks like a dad holding his daughter," as the man indicated this in a reply to Omega, with Omega responding, "Sure, brah, likely story. The boys are gonna love you in the slammer." Another fan would write, "Kenny, that's not a good comeback. Will you disavow your friend Marty Skrull, the pedophile?" Omega then wrote, "Will you bump up Corny's oxygen so he can maybe get through a podcast without wheezing through every word? It's harsh on the ears from what I hear." And this would lead to Jim Cornette saying, "Not sure why Twinkle Toes is referencing me in a completely unrelated conversation I'm not involved in, but he needs hobbies and attention. Hey dipsh, I'm not as harsh on the ears as your ballet routines are on people's eyes, and I'm wheezing from laughing at your attempts to wrestle." In November, Ric Flair noted on his podcast that Hulk Hogan was dealing with some really bad health issues, as Hogan's longtime manager Jimmy Hart recently gave an update with Briscoe and Bradshaw. Well, he's doing a lot better. Still, after 12 back surgeries, hips, and knees, he's doing so much better. He's been taking this therapy every week, and it's been really improving him more and more, so he can get up and get about pretty good now. He still looks good. He always has the hair and has the tan. His upper body is unbelievable. He always looks the part. He can still do an interview at the drop of a hat. He knows what to say and when to say it. He is such a magnet. People love him no matter where we go. It's crazy. Given the announcements made by WWE of those making their way back to the company for an appearance at the Royal Rumble, Paige would end up trending. With many wanting to see her back in action, she reacted writing, "Wait, I was trending again? I mean, it is January. I tell you what though, it does feel awesome to see so many people even after 4 years miss me wrestling." And this was your Pro Wrestling News Update. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.